As a result, you wound up with a majority black population working the fields in the Deep South. Does this rationalize? Does this justify? Does this make it right? Of course not. But what did occur was a massive population inflow of blacks where many of them died en route. Well over 20 million blacks died en route going from the Atlantic to the Americas that we know of due to the overwhelming numbers of people that were displaced by the slave trade issue in the Great Compromise. Basically, he left the South alone, pulled his troops out. They had looted everything they had wanted that was not nailed down anyway, left the whites of the South to themselves to become Democrats. It was a solid Democrat South. And of course, the Democrats founded the KKK, which of course then no longer had to deal with terrorizing Union occupation forces. They turned their attentions thereafter to suppression of the African American population. This rendered guerrilla warfare unnecessary by enacting Jim Crow apartheid being a Dutch term, literally apartheid litigation. They were able to gerrymander voting districts, and therefore the black people's votes were entirely discounted, and therefore the whites were able to prevent a radical restructuring of their society based on their now free, quote unquote, black majority. Now, all of these blacks, for all intents and purposes, went back into slavery. I've explained how this worked. It worked through, of course, these laws concerning loitering. And when they had these vagrancy laws that were established, they could basically tap out on, as labor, forced labor, any black man who was found unable to prove that he was gainfully employed. Well, since nobody was hiring black men, every single black man in general, statistically and demographically, was unemployed. Unable to prove employment, they were, of course, then hijacked, basically shanghaied, brought to work in the mines of the Deep South. And this is going on through World War II. And of course, they were working for the benefit of northern companies because the North was where all the industry was. But they were tapping out mines in the South to benefit steel mines in the North. Steel manufacturers in the North. So the North was still taking advantage of Southern slavery. Now, you don't have any of that with what the United States established in its slavery across the world. Now, all of you people, again, and I use this derogatory term, however offensively, because you haven't reached a level of mental maturity to come to grips with your emotional responsibility. All of you white boys, and that's the people who take this perspective, are just boys. All of you guys who say, I didn't own no slaves. That doesn't hold because of what you projected onto Germany. By nature of force majeure, you said your ignorance is no excuse. So since the German population's ignorance of what a small percentage of the National Sozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterparty was engaged in was not held as an excuse for their responsibility for paying all of world Jewry the rest of their lives in terms of reparations. You have no excuse in terms of the wealth your nation has accumulated or your leaders have accumulated, since most of you, of course, are living in poverty. There are far more white people in poverty than there are blacks because there are far more white people than blacks. That's still the demographic case nationally, not regionally, but nationally.